This book annoyed me so much, it brought me back to YouTube after 5 years. Hi, I'm Beth, or The Real Imaginary, as some of you might remember me as, and I have not sat down and recorded a YouTube video in over 5 years. I read When the Moon Hatched back in December, and I've been festering on it ever since, and so here we are. It's really strange to be recording a YouTube video again, I'm not gonna lie. I've been an avid reader since I was a kid, and I read a lot through high school, but after I graduated, I kind of fell off of it, and I feel like that's pretty normal for adults these days. But in the past 2 years, I've really gotten back into reading, and in 2024, I read 55 books, and I thought, I need to talk and bitch about these. So one of my main goals for 2025 is to start doing book reviews. I can't guarantee they're going to be any good, but I'm gonna try. I will do my best to be spoiler-free for the first portion of this book, but then I'm gonna rip this book apart. I'm gonna be honest, and I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm not gonna be nice. Spoilers start around this time if you want to skip ahead and just get into the meat of it, but that's up to you. This is a brick of a book. I picked my copy up at Target. I was suckered into the BOGO sale. It has pretty blue sprayed edges, and the hardcover is 543 pages, and paperback is, I believe, like 718. So it's big. It's a big book. This book annoyed me a lot. There are a good bit of trigger warnings in this book. They are listed in the back, so reader discretion is advised. My biggest problem with it was the animal/creature abuse. There is a lot of dragon abuse in this. Well, not a lot, but there's a good bit, and it's very descriptive, and it made me mad. Even though they're just mythical creatures in a fantasy novel, I didn't like it. It made me upset, and it stuck with me, so it's just a warning for my fellow animal lovers out there that it's a bit rough. Just forewarned. So When the Moon Hatched is a romantic fantasy. I'll explain my air quotes later. And the book follows a girl named Rave. Some people call her Reeve. I called her Rave, so that's what I will be referring to her as. And she is an assassin for an underground rebellion in this fantasy world that we're in. I don't think the overall world had a name. There was different names for the countries. There's the Burn, the Fade, and the Shade. But I couldn't find or remember a name for the overall like world or planet or globe, whatever it is. It doesn't rotate. It's just like a stationary planet, I guess. I don't know. It was a little weird. The world building was a little bit strange. But Rave is very broken and has a lot of growing to do. And small spoiler, she doesn't at all. That's my biggest thing with this book, is there's just no character development and nothing of the plot gets resolved in it. There's a glossary in the front of the book that says it's not necessary to understand the book, but I believe it is because time works completely differently in this novel. They are fae, so they live like hundreds of years. I'm assuming it's not really fully explained in the book, but it's kind of alluded to and hinted at and explained a little bit, but really not much. So rather than years, they have phases, which is 1,000 days. DAE, not DAY, because that would be too original. And there's no night. It's called slumber. She really went out of her way to just try and make it as fantasy as she could. And I didn't like it. It takes me out of it, and I don't like that kind of shit. The time really confused me in some sections, and I'll explain a little bit more later on in my spoilers area. And like I said, they're fae, so I guess they live hundreds of years. But the timeline's just a little confusing. And a day is tracked by these ribbons that are the remaining strips of the cloak of a dead god that are tethered to the poles of the planet, and they like rotate around it, and that's how they track their day cycles. It's really weird. I don't understand. They're like luminescent strings, basically, that circle the planet, and that's their day. There's a whole cast of characters and creatures in the beginning of the book too, and it's a little bit of an info dump and doesn't mean much because you haven't read the book yet. There were a lot of things that Parker didn't take the time to explain in context in the book, and I would have to flip back to the beginning, to the glossary, and find the thing. And sometimes it wasn't even there, and she'd just be like, figure it out! But that's another thing that just takes me out of the narrative if I have to flip back through and be like, what is this thing? What is this random word that you have created and made this new thing in this fantasy world, and you're now not going to explain it to me, and I have to flip back to the beginning of the book to figure out what you're talking about. I don't like it. I'm all for a glossary and things like this, but I believe that as an author, you should take it upon yourself to explain things in the book and not expect your readers to just remember all the random information you dumped on them in the beginning with zero context. It felt like a bit of a cop-out to me for some things, and I would have really enjoyed the book more if things were explained as I was reading and given context that way rather than just, oh hey, flip back to the front and figure it out yourself. Then there's part of the glossary that just upset me. Like there's Ma and Mommy, and there's Grandma and Grandpa. I'm sorry, but just adding an H doesn't make you more of a creative fantasy writer. It just doesn't. It's another thing. It takes me out of the narrative. It throws me. It's unnecessary. Parker did do a good job with her world building to an extent. I like the different areas, like the burn, the fade, and the shade. The dragons were cool. Wish there was more of them. When a dragon is about to die, I guess, it's like somehow the dragon knows when it's going to croak and will fly up into the sky and like calcify into a moon. Weird, but okay. And every once in a while they fall, but you know. I wish there was more on the dragons and less abuse on the dragons. I also really liked the magic system. I did think it was very unique. Different fae are able to hear different voices and songs of the gods, and then they're able to speak their words or sing their songs and able to wield that god's magic. And I thought it was really cool, but there just wasn't a lot of it in the book. They talked about it and would talk about the different dual beads and stuff, but it wasn't used a whole lot. There was only a few chapters where they actually use the magic. And I just was like, okay, and then what's the point? The writing in this just didn't jive with me at times. I understand wanting to immerse your reader in a fantasy world of your creation, but you can say cigarette. It doesn't have to be a smoke stick. It sounds dumb, and again, it takes me out of the narrative because it just sounds fucking stupid. And there were a lot of things like that, like the smoke sticks and slumber. It's just random words. They're things. They are things in the real world. You can call them what they are. It just sounds dumb. I'm sorry. Not everything in a fantasy novel has to be original. You can use common words. There was a lot of fluff words and random description words, and it reminded me a lot of Caraval, which I also didn't like. I will make a video on that sometime later. The story did keep me interested for the most part, but it just didn't go anywhere. Sarah Parker had me in like the first 200 pages of this book, but after that, I just couldn't wait to be done because just nothing was happening. It felt like Parker was just trying to save all the meat and potatoes for book 2 and purposefully avoided topics and explanations for that cause. I gave this 2 stars on my Goodreads and Fable accounts. I might read book 2 just because I've spent so much time reading this one, even though it pissed me off, but I would like to get some answers to all of the questions that I was given in this book. But the second one is just not something I'm counting down the days to, and once it's released, then maybe I'll decide if I want to read it. Sip some tea and talk spoilers, baby! If you made it this far, thank you. If you haven't read the book, I'm definitely going to spoil a lot of shit for you, so that's up to you. You know, if you're someone like my husband that likes to spoil stuff for yourself, continue on. Otherwise, you might want to stop here. The synopsis of this book says, as an assassin for the rebellion group, Rave's job is to complete orders and never get caught. When a rival bounty hunter turns her world upside down, blood spills, hearts break, and Rave finds herself imprisoned by the Guild of Nobles, a group of powerful fae who turn her into a political statement. Sounds cool, right? Yeah. Gets you in there. Yeah, that's done by page 170, and then the rest of the book is just complete fucking nonsense. And may I remind you, it's 543 pages long! So much happened, but nothing happened at the same time. Rave is dead set on her revenge up until page 170, and then the entire rest of the book, she just fucks off and does nothing. She continuously avoided any kind of character or plot development. The male character in this book, Khan, anytime he would literally say, let's have this conversation, I want to give you the answers to all these questions, she'd go, no, I don't want to, and run away. Literally would just run away. I wanted to punch her in the fucking face. Rave is honestly one of my least favorite book characters I've ever read about, with how immature and just annoying she was. I understand she's supposed to be broken and damaged, I get that. But if you're writing a novel and you have all of this information that you're hinting and alluding to, just fucking tell your readers. Just tell us. Just, at least in something. Tell us something that makes sense. There was just so much that was alluded to but never confirmed, and you just have to make your own assumptions and conclusions for no reason. It was all set up for you to explain stuff to us. Parker just chose not to. You can't spend all this time building this shit up and then just purposefully avoid answering things for over 500 pages. If she was just that way for like half of the book or 3/4 of the book and had some kind of character development or anything, it would have been a better book. But she didn't. She never changed, and she never learned a damn thing. Don't get me started on Khan. He was such a fucking doormat. I couldn't stand him. He was vague and would dance around Rave and wouldn't force her to have these conversations, even though he would make her promise, we're gonna have this conversation, then she'd just run away and wouldn't do it. So, blah. Oh, and there's one point where he's just like, okay, deuce, I'm leaving, and just fucks off for a month too, and Rave is just at his kingdom doing God knows what, just messing around, when she's supposed to be dead set on her revenge, and she's just playing house in this little cabin she found in the jungle. There are a lot of point of views in this book. You get Rave, Khan's sister, Vea, Elowyn, which is journal entries, the other, and then there's 2 other random POVs that you don't get through the entire book, and then the second to last or third to last chapter and the epilogue are 2 completely different POVs from anyone that's been in the entire book, which, why? And the other. What was even the point of the other? I don't understand it. The other is supposed to be like this alternate personality inside of Rave that takes over whenever she gets really mad, and it is what got her captured in the first place. And the other comes out on page 99, and then you don't hear about it again until page 523. There's 2 chapters left in the book, and that's finally when the other comes back again. What is the point? Why even bother? It's not explained. Rave doesn't know anything about the other. She just blacks out and comes to, and she's like, oh, I've been captured. I don't know what the fuck happened. If you're gonna try and do some kind of split personality thing, you need to put more of it in the book, or else it's just pointless. I'm getting heated. The other just felt very unnecessary to me, and Rave explains her emotions as this icy lake that she will package her emotions into a little parcel and chip a hole into the lake and put it down in there, and I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to talk about it. And she just avoids. That's all she does, is just avoid her emotions, repress everything. And it was just a really unenjoyable read for that purpose. I understand the idea of this icy lake and her emotions concept that Parker was going to go with. I do something kind of similar where I like visualize myself locking something in a box and like putting it in another room to kind of get my brain off of it. But it was explained weird, and I don't think she did a very good job presenting it to the reader. And again, it was just a way for Rave to just completely avoid anything. Why bother thinking about your emotions when you can just shove them in your icy lake? Why bother getting any of your questions answered when you can just avoid it for 500 pages? So one of these POVs is Elowyn, who was a queen back like 120 some years ago who died. And you learn that Rave was Elowyn. She died, her dragon took her up into the sky, calcified around her, and then 17 years ago the moon fell, and that's how Rave was born. And it doesn't make a lot of sense because nothing is explained about Rave whenever she was first found, woken up, born, or whatever. And she's so, I wasn't this person, I wasn't Elowyn, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't remember this. But you were just all of a sudden born as a 17-year-old woman? What? Like, you had no childhood. What do you mean you don't believe that you were this person? And I also can't figure out if Elowyn was supposed to be a different personality of Rave, because they're very different. They're very different personalities. From everything in Elowyn's journal entries, she was more calm and communicative, and then Rave is just brash and hard, and she's such a rough, tough girl, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me with how different they were. Because if it's supposed to be Elowyn come back, why is Rave completely different than her? And this is where the time really started to confuse me a little bit, because in most of these journal entries, they're dated the same. It says age 18 phases, 5,039,000 phases after stone. for every single one, like from halfway through the book and on. Why bother with the 5 million sum if it's just going to be the same throughout the whole book? It made it hard to determine how long Eowyn was doing this, because it is 1,000 days in a phase. So was it months? Has it been a couple weeks? Was it a day? I don't know. If you're gonna do something like that and do journal entries and completely change the way time works, I think you should have some kind of way to differentiate between weeks and months and days, because it's confusing to your reader. What's even the point if she's just the same age and same days or phases after stone every single time? Why even bother? I also want to know that in the 17-ish, I think it's been 17 years since the moon fell. How the fuck has not one single person realized that Rave looks exactly like the dead Queen Eowyn, especially when she's living in the capital with her ex-brother-in-law? No one notices? No one has noticed in this entire time. She's not hiding. She doesn't know she was Eowyn. She's not, like, trying to be secretive. No one noticed? The romantic fantasy, if you can even call it that. Romance fell so fucking flat. Oh my god. I will be completely honest, it was almost painful to read at times. Rave and Con have a history, one that only Con remembers and will not tell Rave about, but not for lack of trying. He doesn't try a lot, but he tries a little bit, and Rave's like, no, runs away. Their banter wasn't great. It felt very forced to me. A lot of people rave about it and you're like, oh my god, they're so good together. Like, no, they're not. They really aren't. They don't communicate. There's no romance. The only reason this is a romantic fantasy is because they fucked a couple times. There was no romance. There was no communication. Just manipulative, explicit sex. Now, unpopular opinion, I don't really like sex in my books. You can be tasteful with it, and then there's just writing corn. And this felt more like corn, but manipulative and a little uncomfortable to read. I don't like very detailed step-by-step process of what they're doing with their naughty bits. It just makes me uncomfortable sometimes. The sex just didn't help the plot or character development because there was none, and I really feel like it was only in there to sell the book. Smut is what's popular these days, and if you put some sex in your manuscript, you're pretty much guaranteed a bestseller. Nobody cares for the plot anymore, they just want their smut. I'm probably missing a lot of stuff that I want to talk about still, but I've been recording for 40 minutes and I don't want this to be too crazy long, so I think I'm going to wrap this up here. So that's my honest opinion of When the Moon Hatched. I didn't like it. And again, I gave this 2 stars. I will link my Goodreads and Fable accounts down below if you want to follow or check them out. I have so many books on there, especially Goodreads on my to be read. If you care, they're there. I have no set plans with my channel right now. I don't know when I'll record something else. I do want to do a review on Caravel, whatever the fuck it's called. I don't know, it pissed me off too. I will be doing a review on that at some point. I need to write up some kind of script and get my thoughts all down on paper. But I'm excited. I'm excited to do these book reviews, even though I'm not gonna be a little nice. It's fine. I want this to be kind of like a log of books that I read, and I'm just able to talk about them more. So looking forward to this year. I probably will do some kind of rebrand of my channel. I don't think I'm going to stay the Real Imaginary. We'll mostly just be referring to myself as Beth. But thank you for watching. Let me know if you have read this book. I will be in the comments down there. We can discuss. And I guess I'll see you next time. Whenever I record. Bye!